Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate a long list of issues throughout the Middle East with direct or indirect implications to the state of Israel, it's always important to remember that 536 days ago occurred the atrocities of October 7th of 2023, when the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip launched their onslaught on southern Israel, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, as well as kidnapping some 250 people. 59 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. And on that and more, let's now turn initially to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, set the stage for us.
So the Israeli Defense Forces entered the second week of the operation in Gaza, which resumed fighting following some 2 months of a ceasefire. The Minister of Defense, Israel Katz, has earlier today been to the headquarters of the Gaza division in order to sign off on further plans for operations in Gaza by at least 2, probably 3 armored and mechanized divisions. And Katz said that the top priority is getting the release of the several dozen hostages still in captivity. And if Hamas does not release those hostages, Israel will take more and more territories within Gaza and hold them as bargaining chips. There is a methodical operation by the Israeli Air Force with intelligence supplied by both military intelligence and Shabak, the Internal Security Agency, to eliminate the civilian leadership of Hamas, the so-called Hamas government in Gaza. Obviously, this is intended so that once the war is over, Hamas will have less of a mechanism to govern Gaza, whatever the political situation is. And there are operations still going on in Lebanon as well as in Syria.
Indeed. Well, of course, civilian Politburo positions, but they have also implications on the military wing, namely the Izaldin al-Qassam brigade, from the person in charge on strategic affairs, Bardawil namely, all the way to the prime minister and man who is in charge of finances. So there are a long list of those type of individuals who are being targeted. And thankfully, the IDF Intelligence Directorate, alongside the Shabak, as you mentioned, are doing really a very impressive job in locating those individuals and eliminating them, since they are a threat and they're members of the Islamist Hamas, a designated terrorist organization. Now, today we have a Air Force presentation here, namely 3 brigadier generals in reserve from the Air Force. We'll start from the top left, no other than Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish, the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. Next to him, Brigadier General in Reserve Yaron Rosen, who formerly served as the IDF Chief of Cyber Staff, who was also an Israel Air Force commander, as well as a attack helicopter pilot, a fighter pilot, and next to him, below, nonetheless, a very potent individual in this group is no other than Brigadier General in Reserve Relik Shafir, formerly also an Israel Air Force commander, as well as a fighter pilot. And I'd like to start with you, General Shafir, when we're talking specifically about the current complexities of operating in a very, very dense situation in the Gaza Strip, something that the IDF has now, of course, being very proactive in this theater for the last several months. How does the IDF and the Air Force operate in unison to find, locate those targets and eradicate them with so much destruction out and about?
Well, it starts off with intelligence, which is the most important part. Intelligence is gathered through many means, as well as knowledge from locals in Gaza. And let me remind you that the Hamas is no longer popular with the local inhabitants, and that helps with intelligence. Then the UAVs scan the areas meticulously with high precision, not just in real time of fighting, but prior to that in finding where Hamas is planting booby traps, etc. Then the forces that advance forward use quadcopters of different sorts to locate those traps or the personnel who put them on, including inside buildings, inside tunnels, etc., and relay the information in real time back to the commanders. And then there are attack helicopters and fighters hovering above, connected to the local commanders in the front. In case they need support, that could be provided within minutes. And lastly, but not least, warriors from the 669 units who are medivacs, who are together with the forces in case anybody gets hurt. They speed up the recovery and have the wounded flown to hospitals within a golden hour, which means that the average is less than 1 hour for when a person is wounded until he's in the operating room inside Israel, which has saved a lot of lives and mediated a lot of injuries. So that's, I would say, sums up the operations, and obviously the connection with the ground forces is very intimate. Certain squadrons with certain units, that speeds up the understanding of what needs to be done on a common platform, which is allows them to speak the same language, use the same terminology, and the same pinpoint accuracy needed for this kind of action in such a difficult urban area.
Thank you, General Shafir. Of course, the 669 Rapid Extraction Unit with helicopters and other means are really on the forefront of activities and have been instrumental in saving countless lives during the course of this war since October 7th onward. General Gavish, I'd like to turn to you. Rocket alert sirens sounded yesterday, emanating from the Gaza Strip. Yet again, I understood that there were 2 interceptions. What can you tell us about that, and what does it actually mean about the capabilities of the Islamist Hamas on the ground?
Well, indeed, Jonathan, maybe I would just add one thing to what was mentioned by General Shafir, that yesterday there was kind of a, I would say, unique anecdotic attack against more than 100 pickup trucks that the Air Force attacked them yesterday, and the strike was very successful. The same pickup, white pickups that we remember for the 7th of October. So in a way, it is closing a circle, but at the same time is continuously hitting the infrastructure of the Hamas. With regards to the rockets, they do have some capabilities. We have to remember that we indeed hit very hard capabilities in this area of rockets. But here and there, we have to be realistic. This is something that we might see as long as we are continuing with the war and even after it. And this is why you have this combination that we talk about it all the time between attack means and defense means. And this is the combination that really allows us to defend at the end of the day our civilians. And this is what happened yesterday, that those 2 rockets that came from the Gaza Strip towards the road were intercepted by the Iron Dome men and women, and the deployment of the air defense in this area is very strong because we understand that now that even more than before, that there should be a chance that something like this will happen. So the air defense is there. We also had a missile coming from the Houthis. Unless we're going to talk about it later, I could say a word about it.
We will momentarily. We'll focus initially on Gaza and move from there to the northern arena and then turn to the Houthis, since we've been focusing a lot on the Houthis in the last 72 hours. General Lozen, I'd like to hear your take on it from a regional perspective. The Egyptians have actually come out and provided a new proposal for a ceasefire, which included also a threat to Hamas. Unless you accept it, all of your operatives will be removed from Egypt, and as a result, they have complied. Nevertheless, it seems like that specific proposal was not relayed to the Americans in this context, since they did not necessarily know what was the topic in question, and much of this has been only circulating throughout the media. What can you tell us about the current state of play in the negotiations, since Israel is not very keen on the fact that Hamas is not serious? Let's put things on the table. They're not serious about reaching a concession about how to move forward to a viable understanding that would then lead to the next stages of the previous proposal.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is the built-in tension in the two goals of the war. One is to completely eliminate Hamas from any capacity in running Gaza and creating a better future for Gaza and Gazans and Israel, of course. And the other goal is to save and get all of our hostages home. There's a built-in tension here. And it's very complicated when you're dealing with a bunch of mafia-like terrorists who are less and less governed, I'll call it, by a central command, because they are more and more broken by the Israeli military campaign. So what we're seeing on one hand is more and more initiatives from Israel to try to sort of push forward the wheels of negotiations with battlefield action. So yes, hitting their capacity to move around. Yes, now we're going for more commanders and more figures in the overall Hamas governing capacity. But the problem is, when you take out all of these figures, who are you going to negotiate with? That's the problem we really have. And consider the fact that the hostages themselves are dispersed with various groups, and each group actually has its own way of thinking about their own future. Like, when is the moment that each one of these groups that's holding a number of hostages, alive or dead, out of the 59, what is their calculus when you want to actually plan ahead how we coerce them to cooperate and negotiate with us? And again, the more you eliminate the people that we're negotiating with, on one hand, you're telling them, you're sending a message that we are serious and you better negotiate. And if you don't, you're going to be eliminated. On the other hand, we are not leaving so many to negotiate with. So it's a very, very delicate campaign that we're, a very fine line that we're sort of walking on. And it actually reminds me of the 2003 US most wanted Iraqi playing cards, the deck of aces, that sort of put all of Saddam Hussein's government on a deck of cards. The ace of spades was Saddam, and clubs was the chemical Ali, and so on and so forth. we're seeing something similar, but the context here is very, very different. If we want to eliminate everyone, we need to think who should be the governing entity after. And it needs to be declared, because when these people see that there's someone standing on their doorstep waiting to take control, if they don't cooperate, they will it will not encourage them to do so. So we're in this very, very unique moment. Again, a very complex situation. There's no right or wrong answer. It's a very, very hard campaign to navigate and build upon that all the other complexities of the region. I mean, this is a real, really, really a real conundrum.
A real conundrum indeed. Well, we're going to focus now on the northern front. We don't have very much time left for everything. So just as an opening, Israel has targeted and eliminated the commander of the anti-tank units of the Radwan force of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Very briefly, please.
This is the old story about the Bedouin whose camel was run over by a locomotive, and the next day when he was in an office and the teapot started whistling when it got to the boiling point, pulled out his revolver and shot at it, because you must kill them when they are still young. And Israel does not wait any longer for threats to get much bigger. Wherever anyone appears or any asset, it kills them.
Indeed. Well, in that line of thought, I'd like to highlight for the second time the Israel Air Force has launched an intelligence-driven strike on the T4 airbase in Palmyra, namely in Syria. General Shafir, I'd like to hear your take on this. To what degree are Israel's various military activities in the depth of field of Syria particularly drawing a certain equation that does also provide it freedom of operation on the ground in the more closer vicinities?
Well, the closer vicinity is actually part and parcel of the security of Israel, because the central, I would say, government does not really control all of Syria. It governs the area of Damascus and maybe other cities, but certainly not the whole of Syria. And the fact that there are different, not just Air Force, but military establishments around the Syria may invite factions, different factions starting from ISIS and others, to take control of those areas and use them for their own purpose. And certainly if these are Air Force runways and fields, these could be used against Israel. And so the IDF is trying to take out the potential threats to Israel from whoever takes over those areas. But right under the table, and not in a frontal confrontation, are the Turks. The Turks have great interest in Syria, even though more to the northeast. But they would like to. They have supported the current administration in Syria and helped them take over. And there's always a threat that they might actually arm some of the forces in Syria. And this may pose a threat to Israel. I would also add that the Turks had in the past sent a boat called Marmara quite a few years ago, sailing into Gaza, trying to break off the blockade in Gaza. And if things deteriorate in Gaza, in their will to be a potent part in that area, may do that again. So this is a kind of an underground struggle between Israel and Turkey on that ground. Adding to that, the situation in Turkey, is very dire, not only economically, but also the Turks or Erdogan just put the mayor of Istanbul in jail and put a lot of pressure on the opposition. So we don't know what's going to happen in Turkey. And this is a good time to make sure that no harm comes to us from any escapades that they do take. So that's kind of a wraps it up in that area.
Thank you, General Shafil. I think it's important to note first, HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, it's pretty much an offshoot of Al Qaeda, even though it does not have the direct financial backing from Al Qaeda as it used in the past. It replaced basically Al Qaeda with Turkey. So there is an element here that changed, but the core of this organization is still jihadist, Salafist, very radical in essence, and this really threatens not only Israel, but many countries in the region who do not see eye to eye with those aspects. Turkey, of course, has put a lot of chips into consolidating the power of HTS in Damascus. Those efforts, of course, have provided Israel also with leverage, since if Turkey does push south, it might cost the HTS its capacity to control Damascus, and therefore they're very careful with regard to the situation in southern Syria. But at the same time, Israel needs also to be careful with regard to what you stated, General.
As we are speaking now, Secretary of State Rubio is meeting with Hakan Fidan,
Yes.
his counterpart in Washington.
Yeah, well, that is a very important point indeed. But within that context, also very important to note that the governor of the Bank of Turkey banned shorting the Iranian market at this point for an entire month, which indicates the severity of the Turkish economy, which of course may trigger all kind of challenges beyond the public protests over the incarceration of the mayor of Istanbul. But 2 minutes each, and let's keep it at that. General Gavish, I'd like still to hear from you on the Yemeni file. How do you see the current state of play there? The United States is doubling down on its offensive capabilities and is not showing any remorse to this Iranian proxy.
Well, indeed, Jonathan, but a word about our northern area. I would say that what is really connecting all the dots that two of my colleagues were now mentioning is the change of strategy. In the end of the day, when we're looking on the military strategy of Israel, we always talked about decisiveness, about alert, about deterrence, about defense. And now we are talking also about denial. Denial the potential threats that we see from our enemies. And this is what Israel is doing. And this is really what is connecting everything. With regards to the Houthis, we have to remember that when the United States is operating against the Houthis, so number one, it is really against the Houthis, but it's also sending signals to United States friends in this region that we are here, and we are not only here on the defensive, we are also willing to do things on the offensive, and it is also sending signals to the enemies within our region, and of course to Russia and China, how far the United States is willing to go. And this is, I think, something significant that we see this change of strategy that we talked about it so long. And this is really what is happening now with the Houthis in Yemen.
Thank you, General Gavish. General Rosen, from a strategic playing field, as General Gavish mentioned, China and Russia are also very much apprised of the various developments in the region and are trying to leverage that in one way or another to their advantage. What do you see from that perspective?
Yeah, I think, as my friends mentioned, we are seeing three things in Israel's action. One is prevention or denial of threat consolidation. The second thing is maintaining air superiority. And the third thing is sending the regional message, which has the connection both to Russia and a long way all the way to China, which is involved here in trying to understand how it sort of stands in front of this expansion of change of U.S. Foreign policy. This whole thing is a new strategy that's reshaping all the strategic interactions in the region, all the way to Ukraine, all the way down to how Russia is sort of reshaping its strategy in Syria itself, telling the new administration that it still wants to be good friends because it has the two bases in Latakia and Khamimim, the port and the Air Force Base. It needs to stay there. It wants to stay there. It's very important stronghold in the Mediterranean. And all these things are now in movement. All the parts of this new strategic puzzle are in movement. So Israel is doing things that are connected to Israel's security and very coordinated with the United States' new strategy and very proactive strategy in the Middle East. And it's helping the US to expand the warning to the regional players that there is a new sheriff in the region, namely the President of the United States, and we are not letting threats to take root, and the airspace belongs to the United States and Israel, and the rest can try to deal with it, but this is how things will work, and this reflects all the way east to Iran, and all the way north to what's going on all the way up to Russia's war in Ukraine. And this is definitely sending shockwaves all the way to the Far East, vis-a-vis Taiwan and the South China Sea. This is definitely something that everybody is looking into.
So I'd like to immediately thank General Shafir, General Rosen, and General Gavish for all of your valuable insights. I'd like also to thank Mr. Oren and mention that we are going to be here again later this evening for yet another edition of Jerusalem Studio to focus on Iran's nuclear program and other challenges related to that with two distinguished experts on this matter. But until then, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.